Hello everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a view counter in PHP. This is an example of what the view counter will look like. It will say views and it'll have the number next to it. This counter can be used on any website, or you can even put it on a GitHub repository or your profile. On my profile I have on the right side a view counter. This is what I'll be showing you how to make. The first thing you'll need to do is create a folder. So I'll create a new folder and call it view counter. I'll open this folder with Visual Studio Code, and I'll create a new file called index.php. So I'll start off this PHP file, and just to test it out, I'll write echo hello world and start this on localhost. If you don't yet have PHP installed, you'll need to do that. I have a video which I'll link to in the description for setting up XAMPP for running PHP. If you have XAMPP installed, you can open a new terminal and then type php-s localhost and then the port number. So now on localhost 8000 I should be able to see this website. So I will refresh this page and it will say hello world. The first thing we need to be able to do is to read from a file. To do that, I'll write a function called incrementFile, which will take a file name as a parameter, and it will return an integer, which will be the current value in the file. First, we will say fp to make a file pointer, and say fopen to open a file, and give it the file name. Now we also have to give it a second parameter, which will be what we want to do with the file, which we could read or write or both. If we say r+, we will be able to read and write to this file. In case this file can't be opened, we can catch the error and display an error message by saying or die failed to open the file. Next, we can make a count variable that will read from the file by doing fread with the file pointer and then the amount we want to read, which will be file size of file name, and then we want to truncate the file, so ftruncate file pointer 0 characters, and then fseek to put the file pointer at the beginning of the file, so index 0 in the file. And then we want to write to the file, so you can say fwrite, pass the file pointer, and the count +1, and then we close the file. And now the return of this function should be count +1. So now let's run this function by saying increment file, and we will call the file views.txt, and we'll echo the result. We'll need to make sure that this file exists. So we can say if file exists, file name, then we'll run this part of the function, and otherwise we can set the count to 1 and write that to the file. So we'll say file put contents file name count. So that will write the number 1 to the file called file name and create it if it doesn't exist. And now this count can be put at the end here, and we can also set count to be this number +1. So that count will be the number we want to return in either case. So now let's run this, and you'll see the number 1. If we refresh the page, we'll see 2. We can look at the files, and we can see that there's a file called views.txt now that has this number. Every time we load the page, this number will be incremented, One more thing I want to do this increment file function is make sure that it locks the file before writing to it. That way you can't have more than one user writing to the file simultaneously and having their views not counted. So before we read from the file, I'll make a lock by using flock file pointer and then say lock ex to make an exclusive lock for writing to the file. And now before we close the file, we need to remove the lock by saying flock file pointer and lock un to unlock the file. So now only one user can be writing to this file at a time. So if two people load the page simultaneously, one of them will write to the file, and when they're finished writing to the file, the other person can write to the file. Now let's make this fancy by making it output an image. If we go to shields.io, you see that we can create a badge with a URL. So if we take this URL, which has image shield.io static view1 label equals a label, message is the message, and color is this color. We see if we put like views over here, and then the message will say 100, and color, let's say purple. If we run this, you'll see we get a small purple badge. If you look at their website, you'll see that they have different styles that we can apply. So if we want, we can apply the for the badge style by saying and style equals for the badge. And now it's bigger text in all uppercase. Make sure we put a T in there. All we have to do is send in these parameters to this URL, and we'll get a badge. So let's put this into our code. Over here, we'll say URL equals this URL, make it a string. But instead of having all of these parameters just like this, we can make this a little bit neater by making them in an array. So say params equals, we'll need the label, and we'll need the color, and the message, and the style. So the label, we want it to be views. The message will be what we get from the file. Color will be purple. And the style will be for the badge. Now let's get the message. The message should be what we get from increment file. And we will pass it the name of the file, which we'll call views.txt. And now, instead of this, we can echo the URL, make sure that we add in these parameters here. We'll say HTTP build query to turn this array into a query list, and send in the params. So now we have this URL, and the query part will be the query built from this array. If we run this, see this is the URL that we generated. If we open this in a new tab, we'll see that it says view 6. Now I want to actually output that as the content of our page. Before we can do this, we need to set the header of content type to be an image. If we go to this URL, you can see that the image is an SVG in XML format. So we'll need to set the header content type and set that to image/SVG plus XML. And then when we echo, instead of saying URL, we can say file get contents URL, and this will get the response from the page and output it as the response from this page. So if we refresh this, you'll see we get the badge. It says view 7. I have the zoom up here, so that's why it appears larger, but this is what it would look like, and I'm just going to zoom in so we can see it better. Every time we reload this page, it will increment the number. So it's 8. If we refresh it, it will be 9, etc. So now if we were to put this code on a server, then whatever URL we put this on will be able to be used as the source of an image tag in HTML or in Markdown for GitHub. One more thing we should add is to disable the cache. To disable cache in PHP, we'll need to create a timestamp, which will be equal to the date with the day of the week, the day of the month, the year, the hour, minute, and second, and then concatenate that with GMT. So this will be the GMT time zone time with the full date. And now we will set the header expires to be the timestamp. We will set the header last modified also to be this timestamp. We'll set the header pragma to be no cache. And we'll set the header cache control to be no cache, and also must revalidate. And we'll see if this is still working. But every time you load the page, it'll get a fresh version of the image, so it won't show an old number. Now let's say our numbers got very high, and we got a number like this. Now we'll see that there's no commas, no shortening, it's just displaying the number as it appears in the file. We can make this look nicer by shortening the number. Like you see on shield.io, you'll see that generally when there are large numbers, they use like 69K. They'll put a K at the end to denote 1,000. So we can do that too. There's a good script that I found on Stack Overflow that will do this. The one from Justin Vincent is a very concise function that will take a number and add in the unit for thousands, millions, billions, and trillions. So we can copy this and add it to our file. And I will put a link back to this comment in the code. So we'll say short numbers from this URL, so we can always find it later. So now we have this function short number that we can call. Over here, when we put the message into the parameter, we can call the short number function, and that will convert the number. So if we refresh this page, instead of saying 105.346, it will say 105.3K, which is easier to read when you have large numbers. If you want to customize it further, we can add a logo. So let's say that we're using this for a GitHub account, so we can say logo and say GitHub. And if we refresh this, we'll have the GitHub logo added on the left. You can also make this say profile views instead of just views, and you'll get this profile views. And we'll want to reset this if we're going to use this for our account, so it'll give an accurate number. Or if you really want to make your profile seem very popular, you can put a large number in there, like 50,000, and that's what your badge will say. Every time someone views your page, it'll increment the number by 1, so you'll get an accurate number starting from whatever you put in the views file. Now I'll show you how to put it on your GitHub profile page. You'll need to put the code on a server such as any website server, if you have one, or you can put it on Heroku. I'll be making a video soon on how to deploy your apps to Heroku. The one that I have on my profile page is using a website. So you'll see in my README, I'm able to put some HTML code in here. And I have this URL, and I can just set that as the source of the image and link it to my GitHub page. So just this image tag with the title being GitHub Views, that's what happens when you hover over the picture. It will say GitHub Views, and then the image source is going to be this image, which you can see over here. It's just making a shield that it gets from shields.io and displays what the current number of views on my profile page has. I hope this video is useful. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content just like this. On this channel, I'll be making many programming tutorials, and I'll be giving many tips for developers. If you're interested in learning more about programming, subscribe so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching. Bye!